Welcome to SMN, the podcast for anyone who knows the roller coaster of living in a new country. Whether you're crying alone in your bedroom with no friends, don't worry, we've all been there, or can't get over the fact that this is the awesome life you live. This is your place to laugh, learn, and feel a little less alone on this wild ride. I'm your host, Kat, just a regular American living in Ecuador, figuring it all out one very baby step at a time. From epic language fails to humbling life lessons, I'm here to share my journey and help you navigate yours. On this show, we'll laugh, cry, and maybe even cringe a little as we dig into the real, messy, hilarious truth about life abroad. Ready for a good laugh? Great. Vámonos, baby. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SMN. I am so excited you guys are here for episode number 2, baby. So today I kind of want to just dive right into it. I want to talk about how I went from teaching English every day, online, in person, whatever, to basically becoming a local celebrity. What? I just got back from Manta this past weekend and I had people who came up to me and asked for a photo. And honestly, y'all, it still doesn't feel real. So I want to go ahead and jump into it, going back to when I was a small child, little cat. So when I was younger, I was very a rule follower and I was really good at school. I was just like, getting good grades was always really important to me. But even more than that is I always wanted to make money. So I was always randomly looking for the most random ways to make money. And I remember when I was around 14 years old, I started looking at dropshipping, and there was this thing online that was like, you can pay, I think it was like $200. And at the time, that was like a lot of money. Also, when I'm 14 years old, I was working at a barn, but it's not that I was making that much money. And you also had to be 18 to do this. So I remember learning the ins and outs and studying drop shipping because I really wanted to make money. And I was like, wow, I just can't wait for the day that I turn 18 and I can really start doing this. I don't need my parents' permission. I don't need I can have my own credit card. So many things. And then I got into looking into mystery shopping. Like, your girl wanted to make money in whatever way. I was looking for it. And so that gives you a little kind of like background of me. And then I went on to a university that was, at that time, it was a top 20 public university. And I just always saw myself really becoming something. And I studied business, not really knowing what I wanted to do, but knowing that business was broad enough to get me into rooms, I guess. And I'd figure it out. You always think you're going to figure it out. And then, yeah. So I graduated college early. I went down to backpack South America. You guys probably heard about that in the first episode, but my why for Ecuador in the beginning was never like, wow, I'm going to grow my career. It was always in the back of my head that I honestly was going to have a gap on my resume because everybody kind of kept telling me that. But my why for being in Ecuador at this point in my life was, yeah, put in a year, learn more of the language, see what happens with Diego, and have some fun. This is an experience. The fact that I have this opportunity to live in another country and learn how other people live is amazing. So the first year for me in Ecuador was Gucci, y'all. I was like, wow, I'm here. I'm learning the language. I'm having fun with Diego. I'm meeting new people. I'm having new experiences, all these things. Diego's career at that time was starting to kind of take off. So for reference, when I met Diego, he was making minimum wage. And I could see it in him that like he was so capable of so many things. And I think obviously he knew that. And so anyways, I just really saw his career start to take off. And I was really nervous because, to be honest, Diego didn't finish college. And in my head at that point in my life, I was like, if he doesn't have a college degree and we go to another country, like we're going to be screwed. And so there were so many little things floating around in my head that I was just like, what are we going to do? But also fully knowing that Diego is the most competent, capable person in this world. But I think there's just so many fears of just taking another person somewhere. And so as the year was kind of wrapping up, the first year in Ecuador, I was like, okay, I'm okay right now. I could stay longer. What if I apply for my temporary residency? So I apply for my temporary residency and I get it, of course. And
I decided to stay for 2 more years because temporary residency is a 2-year visa. And I was like, okay, this is great. And that's when the shininess of living in Ecuador kind of wore off. And it kind of set in that this was my reality. Every day I was waking up, teaching English, doing the same thing, rinse and repeat. And it started really hitting me like, is this what I want with my life? Like, am I burning away my life? I always wanted to go to Asia. And then I always saw myself being this career person, like dropshipper Catherine, always wanted to be this like entrepreneur or somebody who was, making money or doing something big or making a change in the world. And I just felt like I was stuck in this box every day doing the same thing. And it's nothing against people who are teachers at all, because it was honestly so rewarding. It was no longer a challenge for me, and I just felt like I wasn't going in the direction I wanted to with my life. So I started having conversations with Diego about the possibility of moving somewhere else. And if you know, Diego got denied the tourist visa 3 times to go to the US. So the US really wasn't an option. I didn't want to get married. And I honestly would get so defensive and angry when people are like, why don't you just get married? I'm like, are you kidding me? I get married just to move to the US? Like, I don't know. It was a really tough time for me. I think I was struggling in more ways than I realized, not knowing what to do with that. And then also like not being super happy in Ecuador and just so many things. So we did a lot of research and we decided we wanted to move to Hong Kong. So basically we moved to Hong Kong. It meant that I could get a job. So teaching English again, but it would get me to Asia because if you don't know, I taught English in Thailand. I love Asia and I just wanted to get back somewhere in Asia for a little bit. I knew it wasn't going to be a forever thing. And so Hong Kong became the place. I could get a job. He could get a dependent visa and we didn't have to get married. We did have to get a civil union, which tomato, it's pretty much the same thing. But in my head, it wasn't marriage. So Hong Kong was where we were going. But it was really hard for me because while I was unhappy in Ecuador and I wanted a change, there was another part of me. And I say I was unhappy in Ecuador. I was doing what I thought was my best at the time. And I did have friends and I was doing things, but the cultural differences got to me some days and I let them get to me. And we'll get into that in other episodes. But yeah, I was really struggling with that. And then on top of all of that, as far as the move went, I really wanted to get to Asia. And when I was thinking about going to Asia, my biggest fear was that, Diego and I were only like 1.5 years, 2 years into our relationship. And I was like, what if I pull this man up out of Ecuador and I take him over to Hong Kong and we break up, or I want to break up with him, or whatever happens? Like, I'm going to feel so guilty because his career was really starting to take off in Ecuador. And I'm like, and then all these fears started to fill my mind. And I'm like, I just don't know. And honestly, it gave me so much anxiety. I was like, I need to make a decision. Like, are Diego and I going to stay together forever? Or like, what are we doing? And so I just gave myself this unnecessary stress. And whenever we'd bring up potentially moving to Hong Kong to people, because we kind of had to keep it a secret for a little bit, people would tell me like, no, you can't let Diego go. Like, just give him 2 more years. And I really struggle with that because there was a little like, dropshipper Catherine drowning. Like, I'm just like, feel like I'm in this like rat race working 3 jobs and like, I just don't feel fulfilled anymore. And I know people's concern was Diego and their intentions were good, but just hearing it confirmed day after day by people when we started telling them, like, it really hurt because I was like, nobody's on my side. And I know like they all have the biggest and best heart. Of course, they're looking out for Diego and they didn't know where I was mentally and stuff. And so anyways, it was just a really dark time for me. So fast forward to February of 2020. I think you know what's coming. COVID. I had already resigned. I was still working at the tech company in Fulbright and then obviously online. But the tech company in Fulbright, I sent in like my resignation. And once we finished up in like a week or 2, I was out. And y'all. The pandemic happened and I only thought it was going to be like a 2-week thing. I think a lot of us thought it was going to be a 2-week thing. Not. And we were still planning on going to Hong Kong. Like that didn't change anything for us until we started hearing that borders were closing. So I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Diego has been denied his US tourist visa 3 times. So there was no way he was going to get to the US. And then Ecuador was making it so that only residents and citizens could come into Ecuador. My temporary residency was about to expire. So I was like, shoot, what do we do? And if we move to Hong Kong, the cost of living in Hong Kong is like, an apartment is like $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, where in Ecuador, I was paying $250 for my room in my apartment, and so I could make it a lot further in Ecuador, but in Hong Kong, it's like we were really gambling. And so there's just a lot of factors to think about, and it was a little scary, but we were just kind of figuring things out. And so anyways, I remember we were still thinking about going to Hong Kong. We go to Cotopaxi. If y'all don't remember, or if you don't live in Ecuador, have zero relationship to Ecuador, the pandemic was rough. In meaning that we had a curfew at 2 p.m. I remember we were walking Ginger. We only had Ginger at the time. She was our pandemic pup that we ended up being a foster fail with. That's a story for another day. And we would walk her outside, and because, dogs gotta pee. And we walk outside, and the police stopped us. They're like, nope. And they tried to write us a ticket. I'm like, it's 2:45 p.m. My dog's gotta pee. Are you kidding me? Nobody's out. I'm not in, anyways, whatever. So we escape, and we go to the Secret Garden Cotopaxi, which is this beautiful hostel. And I know I talk about it a lot, but it really is truly magical. And I've had so many big life moments there, and it's about to come. Wait for it, because I probably had one of the lowest moments of my life there. But we're in Cotopaxi with his mom and his sister, and we're walking down this really really driveway, and God, how good was it to just be outside? Because at the time, like I said, we were in Quito, we were in an apartment. So anyways, we're walking outside, and we finally tell Diego's mom that we're thinking about leaving, which I don't even know. I don't even know how she hadn't known up until that point. I kept telling Diego, I was like, when are you going to tell the people? When are you going to tell the hostel? When are you going to tell your parents? And I guess that was the best time. So anyways, we are walking down this gravel road with this beautiful scenery. And I remember he finally tells his mom, and rightfully so, as his mother, she's like, but what are you going to do? And, what about your career? And I just don't know. And of course, any mother's concern, but it was just, I was in such this vulnerable state that I think, having heard it probably 25 to 30 times at that point, of everybody being like, well, what about Diego? That I just really was just crumbling inside, because I wasn't in a good place, and I was really struggling. And I, also had the same thoughts for Diego at the same time, where I was like, is this the right decision to move to Hong Kong? Because his career is growing, and what if we break up again? And not again, but what if we break up in Hong Kong? And then, he gave up everything to come to Hong Kong. And so I just had so many thoughts floating around in my head. Anyways, we go back, we have dinner, and we're sitting in this cabana that night there. It's just me and him. It's our room. And I lose it. Because I'm just I just don't know what to do. I'm not happy, and I just feel so bad about bringing you somewhere, but I'm not happy here. It almost makes me emotional even talking about it right now, because I just remember how low of a point it was for me. It was probably the lowest in my life. And I just lost it, and not knowing what to do. Do I apply for my permanent residency? Because clearly we potentially might get locked out of each other's countries, and kind of basically it felt like the weight was on me in my head of I got to stay, because Hong Kong doesn't really feel like an option. And I just was at rock bottom, I feel like. And Diego was like, no. And he was so supportive. He's like, let's go to Colombia. Let's go to Argentina. Let's go here. And I'm like, at that time, it didn't make sense, because like I said, Diego's career was really growing here in Ecuador. And it was why are we going to go start over in Argentina or Colombia? I can suck it up. I can whatever. And he's like, well, let's just find you a job that you love. Let's figure it out. And I remember just bawling, y'all, bawling. I should not have shown my face for probably multiple days with how puffy it was after that. And him just being let's figure it out. Let's find something for you job wise. And I remember being I just don't know. I don't know what I want. And I'm assuming some of you guys listening can relate to that, of just knowing you were made for so much more, but not knowing what that thing is, and feeling kind of lost. And I was there. I was in the trenches. As supportive as Diego was, it was just woof. And I needed to let it out. I needed to let everything out. And we come back from Cotopaxi. I remember being back in Quito. And y'all, if you know, I love a good Facebook page. And there's this Facebook group that was women who love to get paid while traveling. And heck yes, I was a part of that group, obviously, because I love traveling and I'm a woman and I love getting paid. And so I remember randomly being on that page and just being what are other people doing? And I saw a lot of Forex, which if you don't know what Forex is, it's foreign exchange currency. People are trading it, whatever. Probably scams. Actually, for sure, scams. All the ones that I was seeing on this particular Facebook page. But it got my mind going. And I remember messaging somebody who ended up being a scammer. And I remember messaging her and being like, hey, like, oh my God, like, can you tell me more about this? And she gave me the WhatsApp number of her coach. Super kind, super scammy. I ended up kind of like fishing it out. Like I felt it. And so, but it planted the seed in my head. And so I started looking at day trading. Oh my God, y'all. If you know me, I love adrenaline. I love the hype. I love making money. I love all the above. And so it was just like, this was made for me. And that became my new why I was going to be in Ecuador, because I was like, you know what? I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to study and I'm going to make a shit ton of money. And this is my way out. And I'm going to get my permanent residency. I'll stay for 2 more years and we'll figure it out. So I applied for my permanent residency. I studied the stock market every day. I almost didn't go out like with my friends at all because I was like, no, this is my why. This is my purpose. I am like zoned in, y'all. And I study it. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I get to this place about probably a year and a half, 2 years later where I don't need to study like that anymore. I know how it works. It's more just being in the market every morning. If you're into the stock market and you're into day trading, you know, which I never did Forex, don't get me wrong. I don't know anything about that. And all those people who message me are like, hey, can you give me tips, y'all? I only know small cap day trading and that is it. And then the occasional long-term investment. But anyways, point being is I am obsessed. And if you know anything about day trading is that you don't want to day trade for too long. So the market opens at 9:30 in the morning. Normally I'm at my computer an hour before the market opens and then normally an hour after it opens. So it's like 2 hours. So I'm finishing at like 10:30 and sometimes I'm even finishing at 9:30 depending on the time difference between us and New York. And I'm loving it. But all of a sudden I have all this free time and I kind of go back into this, like I become this hermit of myself again, where I've lost my why for studying. I've kind of figured out the stock market. I have so much free time, which in some people they're like, wow, what a privilege. And yes, it is a privilege to have free time. But at the same time, for me, being busy is so important, especially when I'm living in a foreign country. And it's really hard because a lot of my friends, you know, were working desk jobs. So like I was just kind of chilling throughout the day and I was just rolling out of bed in my pajamas, going to my computer, and I just felt, ugh. So I started kind of like, after 2 years of being in the stock market, I started struggling again. And I'm like, what am I doing here? What is happening? Like, yeah, it was a struggle. And so I remember around that time, Diego and I go to Turkey, and this is 2023. We're in Turkey in September, and there was this woman that I had followed for many years. Her name's Dear Eileen on Instagram. Check her out if you want. But I just remember really liking her content because I've always been a big traveler, and I just thought that she was like real, and I really liked that. And so I followed her travels, and she started hosting retreats. I remember I think it was right before the pandemic or right after the pandemic started or something like that. I don't know. And I remember opening it up and being like, wow, how cool would it be to go to one of those retreats? But I was like, no. Like, I'll never be a content creator. Like, I wouldn't know how to come up with like video ideas every day. Like, absolutely not me. No. But deep down, it was like, because y'all, when Snapchat, when Vine, when all those things were a thing, I used to like love making fun videos. Like, that was just always my jam. And I remember my friends always telling me like, Catherine, you should do this. You should do this. Like, you need to like really make an account on Instagram, especially when you're traveling and all these things. And I was like, yeah. But deep down, it's like shoved it real far down. And we're on our way to Turkey. And this woman, her name's Eileen, she was based in Turkey at that time. So it was kind of like on the front of my mind. And she had actually had another retreat coming up. And this was like her like 8th retreat. She had done multiple retreats at this point. I had followed all of them. And yeah, and so I was just thinking about it, whatever. And so we get to Turkey and it's like the first night. I'm wide awake, y'all. That time difference is insane. And so I'm just like up at night, which is never a good time to make your like life decisions. I'm up at night and I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? If I were to die tomorrow, like what's one thing I would regret? Or like at the end of it all, if I were being completely honest with myself, what is one thing that I would have tried that I haven't? And I just was straight up with myself at like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning in Turkey. I was like, I would have done social media. I would have started an Instagram account. And that was scary to admit. And I remember the next day admitting it out loud to Diego. And I was like, so I've been thinking, I kind of want to start social media. And Diego was like, well, yeah, you should have started like 5 years ago. And I was like, well, shit. and so it was just crazy because he was super supportive and it felt like I was climbing Mount Everest to admit it out loud because it felt super like vain. And there was like a big part of me even starting social media was I was scared of starting social media because I was scared that if I started this account that I was admitting to the world that I thought I was funny. And I just was like, no, like that's not humble. That's not what I want people to perceive me as. And that was my fear. It was just, I had so many limiting beliefs in the way. And it even came out once I had made this decision too, when I was like actually telling people like, hey, yeah, I'm going to start making videos. You know how humbling that was in the beginning to be like, yeah, I'm going to like start social media, like telling my friends. But it was wild, y'all, because I'll just say so many people want to start social media, but they're scared to admit it out loud. And I realized that when I started admitting it out loud. So anyways, we're back in Turkey. Back to the story. I'm in Turkey. I tell Diego, he's super supportive. Yay. On the top of my mind, I also have that this retreat is coming up with Aline. And I'm like, this would be amazing. It'd be a great way to like see how content creation works, have connections with other people. And it was a month away, like from the day that I was like, at that moment, it was like a month away. I don't know, it was in my head. So once again, Diego and I are jet lagged. We go downstairs, we grab coffee, and let me just tell you, Diego is not a coffee drinker. And what happens when you drink coffee and you ain't used to it is you get a little jittery. And he drank dos vasos, dos copas, dos vasos. It'd be two vasos de café. And homeboy starts feeling real ill. He does not feel well. And he's like, can we go back to the room? Like, I just don't feel good. And I was like, yeah, like totally fine. Let's go back. Ended up being so perfect that we went back because he took a nap and I was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to apply for this retreat. I'm going to see if I get in because there's a huge chance that my application just kind of like falls on deaf ears, or my application is just out there and nobody sees it and whatever. And I don't get picked, and that's totally fine. Like, I'm going to put it out there, see what happens. So while Diego is sleeping off those 2 cups of coffee, I am plugging and chugging away in the computer, and I finished my application and I have submitted. Later that night, I get a message from the woman who was like leading the retreat, not the one who was like in charge, the social media person, Aline. And she's like, we really liked your application. We'd love to set up an interview tomorrow. And I was like, what? Oh my God, this is crazy. And Diego was so excited for me. We were just like, oh, honestly, I was like high on life. Anyways, I had the interview and they're like, yeah, you're in. Like, you're going to have to make the payment like tomorrow or today because we made an extra spot for you. Like, literally the retreat is in less than a month at this point. Like, get on, like, you got to get on it. And so I ended up asking Diego, I'm like, this is, an investment. What do you think? And he's like, yeah. Like, literally, if you know Diego, he's just like, I was like, are you sure? Yeah. Positive. Like, tell me now, like forever. What is it? Like, speak now or forever hold your peace or whatever. And he was like, yeah, pay for it. I was like, okay. So I signed up and I am just on, like, I'm like high on life. And it was actually Diego's birthday that day. And I really didn't want to take away from his birthday. So anyways, we enjoy his birthday. We're in Turkey. And then I am just fired up, y'all. I'm like, I'm going to start content creation after this retreat, yada, yada, yada. So fast forward, I go to the retreat in Jamaica after I get back home from Turkey a few months, or like honestly, when I got back from Turkey, it was like 2 weeks later. And I get to the retreat and it ended up being so life-changing, y'all. Like, if I can say one thing is get in the room with other people from all over the world that like your paths would have never crossed. And like, I met women that were so amazing. We were all like empowering each other. We learned so many things, and it ended up not even being that much about content creation, but it was just so empowering being in there. And honestly, we did talk a lot about business, and it was just so good to be around that energy. My goal was after this retreat, I'm going to come home and I'm going to make my first video. And so I came back and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what this looks like. And I put together a video, and it took me probably like the whole day to edit or actually it took me like 2 days to edit because at that point I had no idea what I was doing. It ended up being like a video about the retreat or whatever, but I kept asking people like, what should my niche be or niche, however you want to say it. And everybody's like, it's like pasta, like throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And if you knew me or if you know me now, I'm a huge traveler, big point hacker. I love flying business class, but with points, but like cheap, and cheap points, like not a lot of points. And so I that's kind of where I thought my account was going. And then of course, like the little like here and there of my life in Ecuador, because I know that can be fascinating as well. And so I was really kind of focusing on the travel side of things. And I started making videos, but my biggest thing was like, how do I allow my personality to shine when I'm like, 3 ways you can budget travel? And it just felt like I was watering myself down, but I was like, we keep on. So I kept posting, and y'all, it is so humbling because I had like 1 like, 2 likes, like 99 views. And I'm like, wow, this is humbling. And I encourage you, if you're starting out social media right now, just keep going. Oh my goodness, y'all. And so I kept going. And I was really posting pretty consistently. I was traveling a little bit at the end of the year. Fast forward to January, I remember I was having these like massive stomach pains. They thought it was my gallstones. I had to get an MRI because they couldn't find my gallbladder. And yeah, I had made these 2 videos that were kind of like a trend of like, I live in Ecuador or I drive in Ecuador. Well, y'all hearing my voice say that right now is like, ah. But I remember like that was a trend. So I did a video one day when I was driving of, I drive in Ecuador. Of course, people run stop signs or whatever. And I remember posting it on TikTok, but it fell completely flat. So I didn't think anything of it. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. And then the same thing with the other video I made about like, I live in Ecuador. And I get my MRI results. I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. And like I said, I was being consistent with my social media posting. And I open up my MRI results and I find that it's secondary sclerosis of my liver, probably caused by like some autoimmune disease. Y'all, my life in 2 seconds went and just changed. I was like, oh my God. I started Googling and it was like 10 to 15 years. And then I was like on TikTok looking at people who had liver transplants. And I was like, wow, my life is over. Like I said, I was being consistent in my social media. So I posted the video that went flat on TikTok. And I was like, whatever, I just need to post. I'm not in the headspace. My eyes were puffy. I was crying that day because I was like, And I was like, I have sclerosis in my liver, which ended up being a misdiagnosis. Thank you, MRI reader, for that one. Honestly, thank you. Seriously, because what came from that is that I posted these videos and y'all, my account went from 1,400 followers that I was getting some followers here and there. They were trickling in with my 3 ways you can fly for free. I'd never made a video about flying for free, but you know what I'm saying. And my account blew up. It was like 25,000 followers in like 2 weeks. All of a sudden I had news articles written about me. People were messaging me about podcasts and getting on their news shows. People were like flooding my DMs, asking to get to put me on their podcast, to get on the news, to do all these things. And like, I froze. I was like, what is happening? And the news articles were calling me this like patriotic gringa. And I was like, whoa, which is so crazy because if you knew me when I was teaching English online in China at 3:00 in the morning and hated myself, and the way that I looked at Ecuador then and the full circle moment I had now, like, I was not the same person. And then from there, I just decided like, okay, I threw pasta at the wall and I guess what stuck was Ecuador. And I'm going to talk about my life in Ecuador. And people have loved it. And I never expected that. I know I mentioned before about thinking that like social media is vain and I was really nervous to admit it, but I never realized the way that I could help people or a country until I started getting DMs from people thanking me. I had people who come up to me in person who thanked me. Like, thank you for what you do for my country. I'll be in airplanes and people will recognize me, or I'll get DMs later of someone being like, oh my God, my daughter said she knew you. Or people talking about me on their shows. And I'm just like, me, Catherine? It's just wild. And I never thought that that's what I would be doing. And I love it. And I love the fact that I'm able to promote Ecuador and like, yeah, but what a wild ride it has been. And I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful for my misdiagnosed sclerosis of my liver because here we are sitting in a podcast. It's a man. What the heck? Like, I don't even know, y'all. I just want to thank you guys all out there. I know some of you guys, and because I've gotten DMs, are in similar positions where you're living in a foreign country. You're kind of going in circles. You don't feel like you're being fulfilled in some way. And I just encourage you to like keep moving. Keep moving no matter what it is. And I do want to make podcasts about this because there's just so many ways to kind of get you out of that funk. I love you guys so much. I love the fact that you guys support me and I want to support you guys. And I'm just so blessed for all of this. So thank you guys for listening. Thanks for making me a local star. And I hope that you like this episode. And I hope it encourages you too, that if whatever you're in, if you're starting social media or you're in a foreign country or you're not in a foreign country and you just don't know what you're doing with your life, I was there, y'all. And I still have days like that, but there's a way out of it. And we're going to get into it in more of these episodes.
If you got a good laugh from this episode, make sure to follow the show and share it with a friend who can relate to the highs and lows of life abroad. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram @CatMcGreaves for more stories and tips about life in Ecuador and beyond. See you next time. Ciao, ciao.